Good morning. This is an interesting show. I'll tell you why. Beyond the AI transformation of our world by LLMs, AI has two emerging world-changing technology futures we are steering our attentions to around huge investments, great expectations, and massive implications for our economies and societies. Quantum computing is one, and there's great news emerging around that. But AI robots is the other. And this one, robotics, is bringing AI off the screen and out into the physical world. For decades, robots were highly specialized machines, each programmed for a single job, tightly controlled to repeat a narrow range of actions. So was it with AI. Machine learning mapped a narrow range of observed events to learn how to reproduce sequences in a narrow context. But then came a new generation of generalist AI, and it is changing everything, enabling AI and robots to learn, reason, and adapt like never before. Now, a set of corporate behemoths you know well are vying to have the winning strategy in the marriage between AI and robots. And we're going to look today at three distinct approaches from three of the main players you know well: Google, NVIDIA, and surprisingly to me, Meta. And there are others, not the largest of which is Tesla. Oh, no, it's the largest, I suppose. No, NVIDIA is larger. Okay. This is the Daily AI Show. It is September 29th, 2025, and I am joined by Beth Lyons and Brian Mosseri. 4 days ago, Google DeepMind released news of their advances in AI for robots. And it's coming from a thing that was announced even earlier called Gemini Robotics, but it's from DeepMind, their research arm, and it's their brain-in-a-box strategy. Here's the big idea. They're developing a universal, transferable AI brain. So Google's not trying to build robots directly, and they're not trying to build every kind of robot. They're building a single, powerful AI brain that can power any robot. This is a paradigm shift from specialized handcrafted algorithms to a unified, transformer-based AI model that handles language, perception, and actions. And here's how it works. It has two component models. One's called Gemini Robotics ER for reasoning 1.5. That's the reasoning and planning part of the brain. It figures out what to do. And that model will be available to all developers through the Gemini API, all robotics developers. And then they have Gemini Robotics 1.5. That's the action model that's trained to execute the physical movements of the robot. And access to that one is currently being limited to select partners. And that may be broadened later. But one day after, just 4 days ago, so 3 days ago, after Gemini Robotics DeepMind brain-in-a-box strategy was revealed, Meta announced their Android for robots strategy, using an analogy with, I don't know if they used that analogy, but
they did.
They did?
I think they're what I read, this is what I read, is that they specifically called it the Android strategy, which I only find funny. I keep going, Benindy, but I find that funny because that's clearly Google's strategy too.
Yeah, they're basically copying the strategy that Google had in the world of smartphones.
And so is Google. Google knows Android was a good move the first time around. Why not do it for robots?
Well, I think there's a lot of similarity between Google Gemini Robotics and their brain-in-the-box idea.
Yeah.
So they're focusing on the software component of it. And both of these companies are moving toward a hardware agnostic approach. Okay, so they're not focused on the hardware of building a robot, and Meta doesn't want to do that. Imagine they spent billions of dollars on developing artificial reality,
the
the
MetaQuest and all
devices for VR. the VR hardware was a sunk cost for them. They basically walked away from that when AI moved the map off their plate, right? So they're probably explicitly trying to avoid the costly hardware mistakes that they made, and so they're doing an operating system approach, and they're starting from scratch, it seems. Whereas DeepMind and Google, have been working on Android and operating systems before. Well, Meta is playing alongside that, and then we have to talk also today about NVIDIA, because NVIDIA has a completely different approach, which is a vertical, sort of vertically integrated stack of software, hardware tools, including the physical compute brain that has to be used in order to manage these robots. And so we have these three main players all against Tesla, which is, with their Optimus robots, really a major player in this scheme. Okay, so that's my introduction to that. I turn it over to my colleagues. Tell me what you think.
Well, it was a great introduction to it, and I think there's some like great to see, but also not shocking things about some of this. Which, number one, Google obviously has had success with the Android platform. Now, by the way, Google also makes their own phones and does have hardware, and there's not to say that Google wouldn't in the future have a desire to build their own robots, but to your point, that's not where their focus is right now. And they're really looking at this sort of two parts of the same brain model. But that's not that far off from what NVIDIA is saying. And frankly, probably close to what the way Facebook is looking at, Meta is looking at it from their side. So I think this is a playbook we've seen before from Google, which is great. And I think it's really, really exciting, especially when I got into the research of it and looking about how they're approaching this. Let me jump past NVIDIA for a second and go to Meta. I think we've also seen this playbook from Meta, which is wait, look, we have large bank accounts and we can just go buy our way into sections. I mean, clearly we've already seen this in the AI section. Now, will it be successful? Can you literally buy your way with huge, packages, starting packages and buyout packages and God knows what? When they were a couple of months ago, they were in all the news because Zuck was personally reaching out to get some of the best of the best of the best when it came to AI developers and researchers and the greatest minds that we have on earth, quite literally, that were sometimes at other companies like OpenAI, and there was poaching going on, the whole thing. But we've seen this plan before from Meta. And by the way, we've also seen this succeed from Meta. So I don't think they're wrong for doing this, which is to say, okay, we have lots of cash. Meta is different too, because don't forget, Zuck still owns the majority of the company. He doesn't. He just said this himself on some interview where he goes, "It's different because I'm not here to pander to the board to help keep my job. I don't have to. I don't have to do that. I don't have to say all the right things and hope that they keep me in power. I'm still, 51% of whatever he owns, maybe more than that or whatever, which is unique. So I think it gives him and obviously many others at Meta, but the unique opportunity to say with a singular focus, we're going to go out, we're going to hire what I read was 100 engineers, and we were going to put a full focus team towards this effort. We've seen this before from Meta, and I think there's a play there that has been successful in some ways to them. Yeah, they've had some missteps as far as perhaps by VR. I don't know where they are in terms of profit or non-profit. I'd have to look it up for like their Meta VR glasses. I don't think they're going to abandon that, but it is interesting to see what the overlays will look like when you go to these conferences. And, but Meta was literally just talking about that and how you could scan a whole room and then it would become a digital twin of that room. So they're clearly still in that space and they're probably still using their hardware for it. So that's Meta, and I think they're really interesting. We could certainly dive more into that. And then you have NVIDIA, which, to you, like you said, is just taking that different approach that's fully vertically scaled, and their thought is, well, we can control this end to end. And they're partnering with some big players in there, as are the other two companies. But theirs is a little different. They want to not only be producing the brain, but they want to be producing the hardware. The difference, though, as I see it, between the way they're hedging their bets and Meta is obviously we know NVIDIA, we've talked about it on the show several times, about their synthetic data. They believe heavily that they can go far, much farther on synthetic data. They're for everything that we can produce in the real world. There is a stat that they produced basically like 175,000 motions for a robot in 11 hours. And if you were to do that through actual coaching and teaching of the robot to do those movements, it would have been something like 9 continuous months of human work. And they proved that they were able to do this within like 11 hours. So when you look at their pyramid, you have all the corpus of knowledge of like videos that already exist in the internet and things like that. Then your second level of that pyramid is all this synthetic data. And then the tippy top of that pyramid for NVIDIA is the things that you would actually literally have to like demonstrate. And when you do more of the motion capture stuff, because it's unique to that robot. Versus Meta is saying, we think we can get there basically without the synthetic data, or that's not where their focus seems to be. It seems to be more on, we think we can train robots in a very efficient way based off the trillions of hours. I don't know what number to put on that, of videos that are already out there that could help train robots. And I don't want to keep going and going and going, but like those are the big different areas. You got your whole vertically integrated part of NVIDIA. You have Meta, who can put the money and buy into an area, but they've clearly said they're trying to do the Android side of it. And then you have the year over year successes of what DeepMind has come out with and what they're deploying. And obviously they also have deep pockets, so there's no lack of money here. But it'll be really interesting. And if I had to throw my money behind any one of them, it would be NVIDIA, because I do think they have the most chance for explosive success with synthetic data. What they're doing with digital twins is pretty amazing, because the idea that you would be able to take one robot, literally place it in the middle of a warehouse of 100 or 1,000 other untrained robots, and immediately share information to those other robots through because they've been trained through the synthetic, through the digital twin, and them already knowing essentially how to do the work. I think that's really, really interesting. So that's where I kind of come out on it. It's really fascinating.
Thank you for that. That's very thorough, perspective on those three players. Mm-hmm. I want to quickly mention the other two that, I've mentioned Tesla, but also remember Apple is reportedly exploring robotics, including humanoid robotics, and their approach to that, it's as confusing as their approach to AI is today. But who knows? Apple could come from behind and bring that in. Beth, what do you think?
So I like that you brought in Apple, because I also want to reference the fact that essentially what a robot is a brain with sensors, right? It senses its environment and then makes decisions based on the environment and the information that it's taking in. And we are actually the humanoid with our phones and our smartwatches and the things that we're wearing in the environment. Now, there's a lot about, is Google training on our data, right? Of course they're not. You would have to sign a million things in order for that to be happening. But I do want to say that that a big piece of this humanoid perspective of training is us doing the things that we're doing with the sensors that we wear on our bodies. And it's very much what Tesla did, right? Tesla's a car, but really it's a data collection factory in the form of vehicle that collects information based on the perspective of a vehicle. And we have been carrying the sensors and generating the data for that. Now, in terms of like the companies that get data from your phone, Facebook is like the giant data hog. So it would be ironic if, in fact, Facebook was the one to come out of that as the winner of all the data that it collected based on your phone, just because they don't care and they're happy to hoover up anything because advertisers might want it, right? Like that's sort of the backbone of that rationale. And Apple and Google are trying to be more trust-based, but
I'm glad you brought up trust. I'm curious what you guys think on this. I think here's what I think. I think Zuckerberg and Meta, because for real good reasons, I'm not saying this is unjustified, but I almost feel like nobody trusts what they're saying. I mean, Cambridge Analytica didn't help. There were some other things that probably didn't help. It always seems like there's some sneaky back end, switch that's being changed on your Instagram or your whatever, and all of a sudden you've agreed and opted in again to doing data and you weren't aware of it, and then you see people come out and make videos about it. So like, I don't know if that's the prevailing thought on it, but there's a lot of like, is Zuckerberg sort of the Lex Luthor here in there, and like he's going to succeed. It's just like, how is he going to do it? And is anybody going to really trust as he does it? Right. So and I could be wrong about that, but that's sort of my perception of that. And then you have NVIDIA and Jensen Huang, and I don't currently, as I hoover in, to use that word, all the information and the thoughts and stuff, I don't really see anything out there. I don't see papers and stuff in research, perhaps I'm missing it, that talk about how people are just like generally distrusting of NVIDIA. I don't, it's not like they haven't been around for a while. They've been making, all the gaming chips forever and ever and ever, it seems like. I mean, any major computer knows who, or any major like gamer or heavy video processor, anybody that's doing anything with After Effects or whatever has known about NVIDIA for years and years and years and years. And of course, in the last few, because of AI and their chip making capacity, obviously things have changed for them. And anybody who invested 4 or 5 years ago is, I'm sure, happy as well. But I don't hear anything necessarily negative. I don't hear people going like, oh, I don't know about that NVIDIA. I don't really trust what they're doing with robots. And then you have Google. And then like, think about Google. Google is not only Google. Google is just DeepMind, but also Waymo. Google has as much, maybe more, in-car traffic data than perhaps maybe even Tesla does. I know we think about Tesla as being like, well, you can't go above Tesla, and that might be true because people own Teslas versus only there's certain Waymos, right? But Waymos have traveled millions upon millions of miles now of test data, and that would all be, we would assume, available to Google. So I don't know. And do people inherently distrust Google? In order, I would say I don't hear anything bad about NVIDIA. They're in a pretty good spot. Then probably Google, and then higher than Tesla. I don't know where you put Meta in there.
Because NVIDIA is a really interesting company. NVIDIA became successful because they listened to what their users wanted and gave it to them. Yeah. That's why the graphics cards are so amazing for AI, not because they had this brilliant, long-running idea about how it could be used in a future AI world, but because their users, who were gamers at the time, wanted specific things, wanted to be able to do more of X, Y, Z. And so they built to that, and it became a very successful company. And I think the knock on Meta and Google is that they are not listening to their users as much.
Well, would you say that with Gemini? Because think about how we all talked about Google 2 years ago, and think about how you think about Gemini now, and they're best in class at a lot of places. They've obviously had recent success with Nano Banana. I don't know if they thought they were going to have that success or not, but that's been a highlight or whatever. So do you still think that, Beth? Do you feel like Google's not listening, or when they sort of, what was it 2 years ago when we heard all about, like, whether it was true or not, about all these internal meetings of, what do they call it, red alert, or whether there was a term they used for it or whatever. And they were like, yeah, no, there's some serious like internal meetings happening about Google about why they can't seem to succeed. And this is even like post Bard, but sort of early Gemini in that area, whatever. Do you, I'm just curious, to like you or Andy, do you guys feel like they're still not, or do you feel like they've learned their lesson in pivoting a bit here?
I feel like Google is so huge that listening can't just be one tiny department. Sure. In this context.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like NVIDIA is a tailor and Google is Walmart. Right. Google listened to people about their shoe department. Excellent. That doesn't mean that the rest of Walmart is suddenly really customer focused, whereas NVIDIA is. I do love what they're doing with Gemini. Yeah, Andy.
Here's a counterpoint that at the Meta level, not Meta the company, but the rise above. Let's go to the 70,000 foot level. So when you're in a transformational period, do you really want to focus purely on what the customers are asking for? Or do you have to anticipate, I I'm going to say, as DeepMind has, about what's happening in the future and way beyond what the customers out there could even know that they want to ask for. And I think that that's Google's strength. Google with DeepMind is putting things out there that are ahead of the game, not in response to the game, and or gamers, in response to the gamers, to take your point. I wanted to just jump back quickly. Beth, I thought your idea that Apple has this data that is surrounding actual humans, and they've got the AirPods that are tracking, what's happening, not just the sound, but the head position, that all of that is giving them the data advantage that you might argue that Google has or Tesla has. But NVIDIA, by the way, they didn't have that sort of robotics oriented data source, but they decided to invent it, right, by creating the simulation environments and the platforms for any developer of any kind of robotic application to use their platform. And then they're going to just continuously refine that simulation environment, the Groot world, I guess it is, or I don't know what they call it. It's Isaac Sim 1, or I forget what it is. I've got some notes here to tell you what it is. But I think all of these companies are having to depend on data. And I just loved your idea that, Apple's using you physically as the carrier of their AI device and their headphones, and Meta has glasses, but wow, Apple is going to have something along the lines of glasses as well. You've got to believe that, and they're going to be brilliant glasses that leverage the work that they've already done, around their VR, the Apple VR systems.
I feel like we'll know that they're serious when they say, when they're like, okay, so you can buy this phone for $1,500, or you can choose to share your data, right? Like, we'll give you a phone, we'll give you AirPods, we'll give you the glasses, we'll do the whole thing. You're still going to pay the service, right? We're not going to take away capitalism from everybody, but yes. And the story that I misheard when Carl said it, I feel like at some point we're going to have this, hey, is there a housing crunch? We will subsidize your housing and give you access to those apartments if you let us watch you in your space.
Okay, so Carl has actually joined us just now, and I'm so glad you came, Carl, because I wanted to point out one of the key advantages of Google's just released approach to a brain in the box for anybody who wants to apply their AI systems as the brains of any robotic system. And the key advantage of what they've built is cross-platform transfer learning. Cross-platform. So this is their killer feature. A task learned on one type of robot, Optimus, can be, if it were using the Google DeepMind system, could be transferred seamlessly to a completely different robot. And Carl, the reason I'm glad you're here is that the demonstration that they used for this was taking out recycling. They taught a recycling robot based on the learning of another robot of how to differentiate on the recycling task. So it's on its way. Carl, you were so prescient. You knew that this was going to be something that you needed in your home and everybody's going to need in their home. And it's on its way.
Yeah, because I spilled my recycling this weekend because I was like trying to run up the steps with the big like recycling thing because I was trying, I don't know what I was trying to do. I was trying to do something else. And then my sandal slipped, and then I fell, and then like stupid couple of those like, I don't know, whatever flew off. And I was like, and then our dog grabbed one of them and started running around. And then I was like, you gotta be kidding me. So yeah, it'd be nice if I can get this thing in, I don't know, later in the evening to just take it out. But again, it still has to be quick enough that I would just do it myself if it was too slow. And I'm thinking like some of the robots right now we have are still not nimble or agile enough to navigate what
I
I
don't know.
need
I
to.
think I'll be happy to let that, slow moving robot take care of it. I'm just going to go on to something else. That's one of the beauty of agents, right? You kick off an agent and it might take a few hours to do the task you've assigned it, but you can turn your attentions to the things that are more interesting to you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
going back to Google and their transferable learning, this is around a subject that we've had some interesting discussions about before, which is that, okay, if there is a unified operating system or a major sort of predominant operating system out there, and they're empowered with the ability to transfer information amongst themselves via that operating system, you have the conditions for a society of mind among the robots alone. They're not communicating so directly with the humans around their sort of behind the scenes conversation. And this is what gives rise to fears about, okay, they can develop their own intentions, their own objectives, and they're ganged together by this operating system that allows them to transfer learning and communicate with each other out there. And that has safety applications as well. One robot can inform another that it's about to cross a line that is in alignment with humans, but it can also give you the conditions for a collaboration among robots that is going to pursue an objective, a Terminator-like objective, right? To reference the film series that is all about an AI and a robotics system out there that takes on its own plans and actions in conflict with human society.
Well, if I can throw just one thing that's been on my mind, and where I get really excited about robotics and these specifically what we're talking about today, whether it's the Android system that Meta builds or the Android system of robotics that Google DeepMind just announced, like you said, 4 days ago, excuse me, or what NVIDIA is doing with their synthetic data and their digital twins. So September 24th, so we're the 29th, right? So September 24th of last year, Hurricane Helene made landfall right by me. And about this time last year, I was up on more roofs that I cared to be on with my neighbor, putting up all sorts of storm shutters and stuff. Now, for anybody that wasn't listening to us last year, I'm in Tampa, I'm in that area, but I'm a bit inland. And so while we did have damaging winds and things like that, and it knocked down my fence and things, we basically walked away from it. And then Milton, for those who remember, was only basically a few days later. It was early October. So we sat right in between these really two damaging storms, and they were both damaging in different ways. Well, by the coast, as we say, the Gulf Coast, but like basically if you were just to go due west of me, you would run right into the Gulf of the Gulf. I'm going to call it the Gulf. So I don't trigger people. It only has one name to me, but it's the Gulf. So that would take me about 20 minutes driving time to get to now. I'm a little bit more ace, right? Anyway, my reason I set this story up is to say, I didn't get to do a ton, but I did get a chance to go over and help with houses and pulling stuff out of houses. And one particular one I went to was, I never met the gentleman. I only met his like, he was 90, but he was up in New York. He wasn't even at his house. Single story house. You sort of think of what an old 1950s style traditional Florida house is. That's what it looked like, right? Single story ranch, right? And he wasn't there, but that whole neighborhood got rocked with water 4 feet up the walls. And so I just went over literally you would just show up on the street and they'd be like, go 4 houses down. Like, it wasn't like you went to go help somebody. You just went to go help the street. You showed up with gloves on, with masks for all that, the mold and stuff. And you literally just went there. And in this particular case, we were just undoing the garage. First, we had to get the garage door working. Then there was a car in there. There were lines halfway up the car where the water line stopped. And everything in that garage looked like, and God knows how old it was, from paint cans to you can imagine a 90-year-old's garage that hasn't really been touched. Everything looked like it was put in a washing machine. It was just this, right? And then boom, just dropped after 4 feet of water. That's what it looked like. And it was a mess. And who knows what chemicals were in there. Never mind, all the sheetrock has to be pulled out at 4 feet. This is still going on in parts. There's still people who don't have sheetrock back in their house, and this is a year later. So now I look and say, okay, that was all human effort. People mobilized, people went in there, but it's dangerous. Just like when I used to do the firefighter stuff, it's dangerous to be in there even after the fire. The fire is one problem. The house and getting in there with all the plastics and stuff and all that burning around you is super dangerous. And it actually can be a firefighter killer. It could be a killer to anybody years later, right? You get the cough, you get the whatever, all of a sudden you have cancer and you can't trace it back to some fire you fought 20 years ago, whatever. Now you look at what robots can potentially do. Now we have the opportunity of a truck coming down the street and saying, hey, relief is on the way. It's owned by the county. It's owned by the state, just like you would have relief come in from just went out of my head. Anyway, just like you would have relief from the county or the state come in, and National Guard is what I was trying to think of. But now you have robots as well. And now the robots don't have to know, based on what we're talking about, Andy, what you set up, the robots don't necessarily have to know that house. They don't necessarily have to know where they are. And you know what I mean? In terms of like what their knowledge is. You can literally take them off the truck and deploy them in the front yard. And then within seconds, transfer the knowledge to maybe there's a robot that's a humanoid, because that makes sense. But also there might be robots that are more Star Wars, on wheels or 3 wheels or whatever, because that makes sense, with tracks so that it can get over really messed up stuff that's not like there's no clear path to walk through. Meanwhile, you don't have to put humans in there. The robots can be deployed really quickly. They can be reset with maybe new batteries or solar or whatever you can deploy, and they can go from house to house. And then what we were doing was taking everything from the inside, for the most part, except for like valuables, and putting it on the front curb. And this was every single house, 30 houses looking in one direction and 30 houses looking the other. And this was one street of one neighborhood of many that looked exactly like this, destroyed by the coast. That gives me hope. That means you don't have to put humans in dangerous places. It means you can deploy quickly. It means that at a certain cost, it makes sense for a county or a state to have hundreds, if not thousands, of these types of robots that can just be picked up, moved to the next location, taught very, very quickly what needs to happen, and they just deploy. Ripping out whatever. So anyway, I know, a long story, but like I get excited about that because that's a real world use case that happened 1 year ago, just here in Florida down the street from me. That would be massive. It would be massive to have that.
And to your factory case, everything that a robot learns through that process could actually be shared learning across the fleet.
That's right. Not just in the location.
And how great would that be for a company, for a robotics company, to partner and say, this is part of our outreach, right? Right? Like figure hurricane cleanup brought to you by or DeepMind or Gemini.
Right?
Or
it's not going to be bad business for them to be involved.
A key takeaway from your story for me was that there isn't just a single humanoid model for robotics that is going to be the optimized application platform for various things. Yeah. Right? There's going to be different forms, just like you see in Star Wars. Yeah. There's a wide range of droids out there.
Right.
And I think that the Google approach, which has demonstrated specifically the ability to transfer learning from one type of robot to another,
exactly,
totally different form factor robot, with using this sort of generalized brain that they've installed in each of them. I think that's the precursor to that kind of vision of the future. But when you think about Optimus, they have their car is one form factor for the robots that they're developing. And then you've got the humanoid. But there are a lot of companies, Figure, Unitree, et cetera, that are focused primarily on the humanoid form. And I think there's a strategic implication here that there may be some distinct advantages in terms of the operating system being hardware agnostic. so that they just, it doesn't matter what kind of robot you want to implement, you can use the Google or the Meta platform. And then I want to shift over quickly, and I just want to recite some of the things that are the components of the NVIDIA system, because the NVIDIA idea is they're building a one-stop shop for robotic development, right? They don't care what kind of robot you're trying to build. So they have an end-to-end ecosystem, and it starts with simulation as a key strategic advantage. And their Isaac Sim is the first component I want to talk about. It's a physically accurate virtual world. So they've really thought about the physics, and you can put your AI brain of your robot into that environment before actually building the physical body. You can learn where it runs into problems and then redesign your physical implementation of the robot around what it's doing inside that. And so you have virtual environments in which to design and develop and test and train. That's Isaac Sim. And then, well, actually, there's another piece of Isaac, which is called Isaac Lab, which is the reinforcement learning environment where complex behaviors can be learned using reinforcement learning. Okay, and then their foundation model, the piece of the brain that will compete with Google DeepMind's brain in the box and Meta's new Android kind of approach, is called Isaac Groot, GR00T. Okay, and it's their open and customizable generalist AI model competing with Gemini. Okay, so it's designed to transfer skills and reasoning across different robots, especially across humanoid robots, but there's a very comparable capability inside NVIDIA. But then NVIDIA adds on to that their hardware. So they have the Jetson AGX Thor, which is their specialized power-efficient computer designed to run these complex models inside a robot. So you can get not only the brain component that DeepMind's just announced, but you use the Groot N1 brain, their foundation model, along with AGX Thor, and you have the full package. And then you put that combination into their training environments, and you can get as an output, again, they're not touching the actual physical actuators, the arms and legs and eyes and ears of the system. You have to build that, but you've got the brain in the hardware piece, the computer, and you've got the AI model to do it. That's transfer learning and all of the other advantages that we see emerging in this space.
And maybe one of the last things I want to suggest is, the saying goes, what is it? History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And so, look, we don't have to look that far back in history. In fact, as far as history goes, it's a blink of an eye to look at both the 80s PC era race, right, where we had predominantly Microsoft and Apple. One was an open system, one was closed. Microsoft, obviously, which we haven't talked about today, but surely they'll be part of this conversation, even if they're not publicly talking about it today. They will absolutely 100% be part of the future of robot, ROS and stuff like that. Microsoft will have some play in here. We're not, I don't know what that is today. But if we look back to the PC era, Microsoft created something that they were able to quickly get out to many manufacturers to run, a Windows operating system. But what did Apple do? Apple vertically integrated, closed, right? Built the Mac. Success in their own way, but differently. Then, if you go to the mobile era, some 20 odd years later, or 10 years, 15 years later, whatever, we saw, similar things again, where you had Apple with its iOS, again, closed system and how they worked. Google, more open-ended, Android, allowing others to build on it. So it's like we've seen similar storylines like this. And there's, two fairly recent, like again, 80s is a blink of an eye in the past on how this has gone. So it's not that the opener, my takeaway on this is like, I don't know. I don't know if NVIDIA will succeed. I think it's high risk, high reward in sense of trying to be vertically integrated like that. Cause there's, well, quite frankly, so many moving parts, pun intended with that. or is the smarter, faster move to do something like Meta is trying to do, or perhaps Google, which is to say, we're not trying to build the hardware in this one. We're trying to build the software, and we want to be open source, and we want to get it out to as many people as possible. Again, we've also seen Meta have success here with Llama. So, it's not a bad public move to do that. It makes you look good in the press. Oh, Meta is sharing their open source, their best of their best model, Llama, and they're sharing it with people so they can build on it, which is true. But that also does a ton for Meta.
I have to interject that, yes, Meta did go open source early, but their superintelligence lab is moving away from that. Right. So their most advanced models aren't the Llama models. That's they kind of had to hit a dead end in Llama 4. Right. So now their superintelligence team is actually going towards closed source. I'm glad you mentioned, Brian, robot operating system, because that's an open source system that is the incumbent operating system for robot developers. Now, lots of vertically integrated ones like Tesla and others are not using robot operating system, but because it's open source, that kernel may be in there somewhere as a key part of whatever they're building that will ultimately be proprietary. But did anybody see who developed ROS, or was it as some open source initiatives are, like Linux, for example, is like many people around the world are involved in developing it.
I don't know. No, I didn't see whether I saw it in there, but
But it seems like there might be an open source, gang that's going to come together around ROS, robot operating system, and add AI to it, right? Because I don't think it was an AI system by its initial development. Beth.
So this brings in the Internet of Things piece too, right? So what we're talking about in terms of robot operating system is like a humanoid robot, or at least some sort of maybe maneuvering thing. But alongside all of that are our smart technologies getting smarter, right? So is the breakthrough at some point Google Home, or the interaction between the Brian's refrigerator and Instacart, and the programmable oven, which flashes the thing on the screen in front of the refrigerator now that says, "Hey, it's 5 o'clock. You want to do this in a bowl?" And like that kind of stuff. Because we're not talking about that, but that is also part of our experience and collecting data from us in terms of being able to offer a service, and then potentially move that into something that could be more like a butler robot or something like that, right? Because there are all these things that are around us that are designed to make our lives easier, or at least make us pay slightly more for it, because it's a smart machine as opposed to a dumb machine, which will mean that it will cost way more to fix. Actually, if you put a computer in it, you're like,
maybe it will self-diagnose and be able to do its own diagnostic, Beth. Maybe if we put that AI in the fridge, it could also say, "Hey, your condenser is leaking," and I've sourced 4 competitive prices for the most local person who might be able to fix this. That would be amazing.
And we will say that we would recommend this plumber who we have a relationship with, so make sure that the part is ordered, the correct part is ordered and on the truck when we schedule, blah 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 blah. Right?
I mean, listen, it wouldn't be the worst idea, right? Real quick, before you guys jump into something else, I want to, just because Greg was sort of offering this too. He was talking about open robotics, going back to ROS or ROS or robotic operating system. However, here's what I found really quickly using AI mode in Google, because I do find that to be very fast. Apparently, Stanford University, pre-2007, excuse me. There's 2 students there, Eric Berger and Keenan Ryobek. Noticed that robotics research was often hampered by the needs to constantly redevelop basic software infrastructure. So they're the ones that started it, and they had the PR1 robot. Then it says Willow Garage. That's the name of a place, a company, from 2007 to 2013. They moved it into their research lab. They eventually created this PR2 robot, which ran on ROS. Then Open Robotics, which is what Greg was just mentioning, it says 2012 to present. In 2012, Willow Garage co-founded the Open Source Robotics Foundation, OSRF, to take over the stewardship of ROS. This organization was later rebranded as Open Robotics in 2017. Open Robotics continues to develop and maintain ROS, including next generation ROS 2, with support from global open source community. So that's what we got back from AI mode. Quickly on that, Greg, you're on top of it. Thank you. Yeah, and Greg's saying Stanford, cool. I'm like, yeah, it's always fun to see some of this stuff. And you're like, oh, it came out of some research lab in a university. Very cool.
Great. Well, let's wrap this up. If anyone has something else they want to add before we close, raise your hand.
Well, I just wanted, the only thing that I wanted to add was that the whole reason NVIDIA partnered with Brookfield was that, like, just talking to the folks that I know at Brookfield, it's a more extensive, what we saw in that, I don't know if we played that video the last time, but yeah, they are, from a show home perspective, from a building perspective, every single element of that, there will be cameras, there will be videos, and they will be training movement in between those, you know, whatever buildings Brookfield owns. That's going to be a significant training aspect. And obviously there's going to be deals between the two on, you know, if you train on ours, then in the future, significant opportunities where I can see not just in show homes, but like, I'm not even sure, like from a building perspective, how that even works, but like there's going to be significant elements of that. And it's a really, really smart move for Brookfield to do, because they're kind of setting themselves up in the house of Jensen to be part of that and providing that training data, which is, if you think about it from a robotics perspective, that is so big in what they can offer.
I love the idea too that there is a future in which human housing is made by robots. Like, you know, this has implications for the construction trade, but instead of stick-built houses, you know, there are 3D printed houses that, you know, use 3D printing techniques on a larger scale to layer upon layer assemble the walls and structures of a very complex building. And they're using concrete and pouring the concrete using a 3D printer model. Now imagine Brookfield has robots that go out and build very economically enough housing to house all the homeless. I love that idea. I don't know if that's going to be the initiative that is the focus of a company like Brookfield, but Brookfield and their collaboration with NVIDIA is very interesting. And Greg, again, being quite vociferous here, saying that particular one, especially for multi-tenant properties, is a huge, huge advantage coming on. Let me close out just by saying that NVIDIA, has this sort of turnkey approach to how to develop robotics using their platforms. And they aren't just offering this, carte blanche to everyone in the world. They have limited time and attention to focus on. But the players that they're working with are the leading companies in the world. So, for example, they are working with all the major robotic manufacturers, the people who are doing the physical hardware. Aptronic, Boston Dynamics, Agility Robots, and Brookfield, right? But all the major players out there are using the NVIDIA platform. And that's something that we don't often talk about when we worry about NVIDIA's future with respect to GPUs as the primary compute chip. That's not where they're stopping. They have tentacles into every area of the development of future technology. All right. Thanks for joining us today. This has been the Daily AI Show for September 29th. And we'll expect you to join us again tomorrow. Beth, do we know what tomorrow's show is?
We don't fully know, but it might be about photonics. So we'll see.
Okay. Wow.
It'll be a great topic no matter what.
Indeed. And we will do all the preparation necessary to make sure that you walk away from our show knowing something that you didn't know before. So join us in our larger community at the Daily AI Show community.com. Also, sign up for our newsletter at thedailyAIshow.com. Comes out Sunday morning. We edit it carefully and make a compact digest of what it is that you need to know to stay abreast of developments in AI. And with that, we'll say aloha.